Happy almost Halloween, viewers. And if you watch this later, then hey, we're here. Good night. Hello. I am ANCHORPETE, and I'm with my wife, Shari T.
Hi.
And last Night in Soho just came out this weekend in theaters. It is a thriller written and directed by Edgar Wright, and we are going to give our live review. I don't know why I'm so antsy. I don't know.
Maybe the movie made you uncomfortable.
Maybe it did. It has some uncomfortable subject matter. That's
yes,
for sure.
Yes, it does. Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to take a little sip of my wine, and we can get this party started. So, Shari, right off the bat, let's tell the people that we're going to give our review without spoilers at first, and then we'll give you a warning when we start introducing the spoilers.
Yeah, because we will be talking spoilers eventually.
Yeah. So, right off the bat, Shari, you are not the biggest fan of Edgar Wright, right? You haven't seen like all of his movies.
Yeah, I like a couple of his movies, but there's a couple I don't like, and I don't particularly love him or anything.
Yeah. I feel like he's kind of from the same generation as me, and he has a lot of similar interests as me. So I think that pretty much all of his movies have kind of catered to a guy like me, right?
Okay.
Especially like Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead. But with this particular movie, I thought it was kind of more in your wheelhouse.
Absolutely. This is different from anything he's done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horror, and Shaun of the Dead is also kind of horror.
Yeah.
But this is like, there's nothing funny about this. It's very serious.
It's very serious. There are some moments that are funny, though.
Okay, but not like Shaun of the Dead, which is like...
Yeah.
It's like, if you worked in an old school video store, did you put Shaun of the Dead in comedy, or do you put it in horror? That's what I'm talking about. There's no question that this is going in the thriller section.
Yeah.
Or horror.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, I actually was thinking that when we were watching the movie last night, that like, you know, it kind of is a couple different genres in one, right? And
I think it's clean, straight horror thriller.
Okay. Well, that's fine. One of the things that might have made this more appealing to you is that it was also co-written by a woman too.
Yes, I know. I think it had to be, because it's so much about the main characters are two women, two young women. Should I say the three main characters are? Okay. Anyway, it's all very women based. It's fashion. Not that men can't be into fashion, and Edgar Wright does seem to have an interest, maybe a little bit in fashion. He definitely has an interest in music. There's this soundtrack's beautiful, wonderful 60s music, and I so appreciate the revival of some of these songs.
Yeah.
That I don't think probably a lot of people are familiar with, but they're awesome.
Yeah, it really captures this kind of feeling that, at least of what we think the sort of 60s London would be. It like really, in a very beautiful way, brings us into that world. Yeah,
I love that time period. Not that I was alive for it, but when I was young, I loved the 60s. My dad always listened to 60s music, so I totally related to the main character in this movie. Yeah. Played by Thomasin McKenzie.
Thomasin McKenzie. Yeah, and you know, when we went to go see the movie, we saw it at the Alamo Draft House, and they usually do this little intro where they might have a filmmaker talking about the movies that inspired the movie. And it was like all of these thrillers that were from the 60s. And I felt like this really captures that look.
Yeah, it looks fantastic.
Yeah. I don't think that it is as like sinister as those movies seemed. Like a lot of those movies look like they were pretty disturbing. And I think that this movie, even though I think it tries to be disturbing, and this is still non-spoilers, I think it's still not as dark as it could be considering the subject matter.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's like kind of horror light.
Right. Yeah, I just think that like Edgar Wright, if you just look at his filmography, he's, you know, makes these kind of fun movies. These like it's enjoyable to watch these movies, and I think he doesn't shake it off completely for this.
Okay.
Yeah. So the woman that wrote it, you know, I thought that you might like this. She actually wrote for Penny Dreadful. That's one of our favorite shows.
So she's into period pieces?
I guess so.
Yeah. So this is set, just to be clear, this movie is set in the present day. However, the main character is sort of like a psychic. What would you call her?
Like maybe like she's empathic, or she's like a medium of some sort.
Right. And she like rents a room in London because she has traveled there to go to fashion school. And at first she loves the room, And I really like something they did in the movie. They show her touching the walls because she's appreciating this room. She had been living with like a really shitty roommate who was super disrespectful and mean to her. So she's appreciating the room, but I think that shot of her touching the walls, I really liked that because I think that's how she starts to connect with pretty much the ghost of the girl who lived there previously. I mean, not previously as in last month, but previously as in the 60s.
Yeah. And
that girl's played by Anya Taylor-Joy.
Right. And so you guys would know, right, just from the trailers that, like, they have this bond, and essentially the main character, Ellie, kind of, like, goes into these visions of the past and sees Anya Taylor-Joy's life. And Anya Taylor-Joy's character is named Sandy.
Yes.
So it's these two girls, Ellie and Sandy, and how they're kind of connected together. So before we go into spoilers, I just wanted to just talk about a few other things. This movie has a really fantastic intro. I think that, like, one of the things that sells me on a movie is the first 5 minutes. You know, I can usually tell if the first 5 minutes are not interesting, then it's not going to grab me. You're making a face like, did you not like the intro? Or
I really did like the intro, but it's definitely paying homage to another movie.
Which one?
Adventures in Babysitting.
Oh, okay.
If anyone has seen or knows Adventures in Babysitting the way I do, like the back of my hand, you know that intro is taken straight from Adventures in Babysitting. And, you know, I didn't hear him reference that movie as an inspiration because in no other way is this movie like Adventures in Babysitting, but the intro is just like it.
Yeah.
Like the shots and everything. She like puts her head out back over the bed, just like Elizabeth Shue does when she's dancing around in her dress. That's the intro you're talking about, right? The opening scene where she's like dancing around in a dress she made out of newspaper, and she's gleeful and happy, and I'm okay with the homage to a movie I love.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many homages, and then the casting I think is actually really great too. You know, because
can I say one more thing?
Of course.
Also, Elizabeth Shue is dancing at the beginning of Adventures in Babysitting to an oldie, a 60s song.
Oh yes, that's a good point. Yeah.
And she is in this movie as well.
Yeah.
Not the same song, but it's just so similar.
Yeah. So, I mean, it has this great feeling of, the past and the 60s. And one of the characters in the movie is played by Diana Rigg. And this was actually her last role ever. And she was like a 60s icon and kind of a fashion inspiration, too, because she played Emma Peel in the British Avengers show.
Yes. I mean, that's famous for the catsuit.
Right.
She wore.
I'm guessing that you kind of are familiar with her from Game of Thrones, right? Because she was the Tyrell.
Yeah. She's also on All Creatures Great and Small, which I watched. But she was, famous from the Avengers.
Yeah, I don't know how far back Terence Stamp's career goes, but he's
60s.
Okay, well there you go. He's in it too, and Matt Smith, obviously, he's from the modern time, but I think he does a pretty good job.
Yeah, so I really like that the movie has these like old 60s actors, modern characters,
and they're aged.
but the movie is about the 60s. I really appreciate that they took the time to cast people who are known from that time.
So I think that we can kind of go into spoilers at this point.
Do you want to say real quick if we liked it or not?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, just general thoughts. It's hard without spoiling it, right?
No, I can say real quickly.
Okay.
I just want to give reasons, I guess, and then I would be spoiling it. Just real quick, I'm going to say I really liked a lot of it, and I do think it was like different than what a lot of the movies are that are coming out these days, and I appreciate seeing something totally different.
That's a good point.
I appreciate just a movie about the 60s. It did remind me a little bit of Cruella in the way it visits like a time period in London, and there's fashion, so it had a little bit of that, but I appreciate that it's a horror movie set in the 60s London time. So there are things I really liked. There's so many little details that are just fantastic. However, there's a little bit of plot development that's kind of silly. I have some complaints. I wanted to edit. It's a little long. I think I wanted to cut a few scenes, and I feel like there are a few missed opportunities, and we can go into all that.
Yes. So I'm really glad that you said all of that, because I actually agree with every single thing you just said. And I'm really glad that you brought up that Cruella comparison, because obviously, yes, 60s, fashion, London.
I think Cruella is 70s, but still.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of 60s music, right?
Yes.
Because they show her as like a kid in the 60s, right? But one of the things, it's so interesting because both of those movies are just filled with songs. But Cruella just feels kind of like this ongoing montage, and they're not building up a lot. whereas this feels like there's some substance to it. And it's interesting too, just a little side note, one of the things I read was that Edgar Wright, when he was writing the story, he wanted those 60s sequences to be devoid of dialogue. And he just wanted it to be like music playing.
Mm-hmm.
But then the woman that wrote it, who we should give her credit to, Christy Wilson Cairns, she said that they need to have Sandy talk because you want the audience to fall in love with Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
And so if she's not talking. But I was going to say that for me, one of my complaints...
She doesn't talk much, though.
Yeah. One of my complaints that I have is that I think it tackles some kind of dark subject matter. And like I said before, I feel like Edgar Wright's kind of more like a fun, upbeat kind of filmmaker. And I just think that like it doesn't go fully into that dark place. And I think when you're tackling that kind of subject matter, it needs to be real dark and disturbing.
He's not fully committed.
Just doesn't get there. Yeah. But one thing I'll say before we go into spoilers is that I think that everyone's performance is very good.
Top notch.
Right. Matt Smith. Anya Taylor-Joy, she's pretty damn fantastic.
She's stunning to look at. She doesn't have very many lines, but she's just, you can't take your eyes off her.
Yeah.
And the lead, Thomasin McKenzie, is really good.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. She was in that movie Old, and I don't think she really had a chance to shine.
Yeah.
But in this,
Did anyone shine in Old?
No, not really. But,
she's in Jojo Rabbit, too.
Right. We keep talking about Edgar Wright and like how his movies feel, but I think it's very important to talk about that his movies are very stylized, and he did have that intro where he was talking about the movies that influenced this, and you can clearly see that the cinematography in this movie is fantastic. Like London of the 60s, you feel like you're there. I'm from New York originally. It kind of made me feel like I was back in Manhattan, like you're literally there in the setting.
Yes.
And
those are compliments, right?
Yeah.
What did you think? Did you have the problems you had were just that he didn't take it seriously or go far enough with it? Or was there anything else?
I also just think that there are some, I think you used the word silly, right?
Yeah, there's a little bit silly.
Yeah, so why don't we just go into spoilers so we can talk about what was silly? Okay. So just the overall spoiler is that you find out that the apartment that Ellie, Thomasin McKenzie, is staying in, her apartment is essentially haunted by the ghosts of many men, and these men were killed by Anya Taylor-Joy's character, Sandy.
That's the reveal, though. The whole movie, you think that Sandy was murdered by one of these men, by her pimp, actually, who's Matt Smith.
Right.
And so the whole time you think Ellie's kind of acting as like the character in The Sixth Sense, the little boy. She's sort of the medium, and I think she's like supposed to like avenge the death of Sandy. I think that's what she believes she's supposed to do. So she like kind of spends the movie trying to get to the bottom of this mystery, what happened to Sandy. When she like sees the murder, she then tries to actually find the person who murdered who she believes is still alive today.
Yeah.
And the big reveal is that it was actually Sandy who turned into a murderess and began to kill her clients.
Yes. And I think that
another reveal, which is who Sandy is. She's not dead.
Right. So yeah, it turns out while we're just getting this all out there, Diana Rigg, who's the woman that is the landlord for the apartment that Ellie's staying at, turns out she's Sandy.
Yeah. You think she's just going to be like this, like kind of funny. She has some funny lines, kind of creepy old lady who's running the house that, she's renting a room out. And you think she's just going to kind of be this like secondary character. She ends up being one of the main characters. And I really appreciate they gave Diana Rigg this part.
Yeah, because it's her last role. I think I might have said that already.
Not just that, because she deserves it. She's like, she's wonderful. Yeah. And like, I think a woman of that age doesn't often get a chance to shine, in a movie, a mainstream movie.
Yeah. And this was her last role. And then also, the woman.
It's her last movie role. I'm going to go back to All Creatures Great and Small. She actually died while filming that.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And also, the bartender woman at the bar that Ellie works at, she died after making this movie too. So.
Oh, that's creepy.
Yeah. Anyway.
Do you think the movie's sufficiently creepy?
No.
Okay.
That's the problem, right? There is some very striking imagery that like makes for an excellent thumbnail, makes for a great trailer, right? But the imagery itself, I was never scared. When I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, I might actually legitimately be scared watching this movie. I was never scared.
I was never scared either.
Right. One of the things that they show is they show like the ghosts of these men that are like haunting this apartment. You don't realize it, right? And they have, you know, their eyes are missing and they're always kind of reaching out like zombies, which that kind of reminded me of Shaun of the Dead.
It looked like blurred faces to me. Like you couldn't get a grip on what they looked like. Really.
Right. And that by itself, like if it was in a still photo, that might be kind of creepy to see.
Mm-hmm.
But just the way they were utilized, they just didn't seem threatening to me.
Right.
And they stalk Ellie to where she's like essentially having like a nervous breakdown by the end of the movie. And so it's just that didn't kind of connect with me.
Yeah. But we find out again, like the Sixth Sense, they're stalking her because they're like, you know, they want her to avenge them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like she has to kind of uncover the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so the movie has these sequences where Ellie goes to go to bed at night and then she's listening to 60s music and then she kind of turns into Anya Taylor-Joy, turns into Sandy, and we see like Sandy's life in pieces as like she first comes to London, she meets Matt Smith, she tries to become a singer, and then he tricks her into thinking he's going to support her, but he really, like you said, pimps her out.
Yeah.
And for me, that's where the real magic of the movie was. Like, especially that first scene where she's in London as Sandy, and you have these great shots where, like, Matt Smith will be dancing with her, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, Anya Taylor-Joy's there, but then he, like, dips her, and then when he picks up the other actress, I love that.
Yeah, they're interchangeable.
Yeah.
In that scene. Yes, I like that, too. And I'm just going to say again that Anya Taylor-Joy is, like, breathtaking to look at, especially in that opening scene. She's wearing this pink dress. I really wish this movie had come out maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago so that I could do a Halloween costume, because that would be a great Halloween costume as her as Sandy in that pink dress. Like they kind of, I don't know why they picked the release date of this like the day before Halloween or 2 days before Halloween. I just think it would have been smart a few weeks ago to have come out.
Who knows? I mean, maybe it has something to do with COVID too when they released it too.
Right. Who knows all the intricacies of the movie business? But I'm just saying.
Right. And like with the two of them being intertwined like that, there's this like great sequence where like Matt Smith is like kissing Anya Taylor-Joy's neck, but then Thomasin McKenzie, you can see him kissing her neck in the mirror. I love that stuff with the mirror play. It's like really well done. Yeah,
there's a lot of that. And that's symbolic too, you know, that like she's mirroring the life of Sandy.
Yeah.
Right. I was confused about this is like to me a plot hole because most of the movie Ellie is just like seeing visions pretty much of what happened to Sandy and like her demise pretty much. But when she wakes up after the first morning and Matt Smith has given Sandy a hickey, Ellie has the hickey. Like she actually has a hickey on her skin. And to me, that's like, you know, that's reality.
Yeah.
And I was thinking this is more like a psychic thing.
Yeah.
So that kind of confused me. And in no other place in the movie do I feel like that reality is intruding or the past is intruding into reality except in her mind.
That's a really, really good point. I think that if the screenwriter and you put that in front of me, like kind of saying like, what's up with this? I think the way I would write it off is like, maybe she's fully getting into the moment and becoming Sandy in that moment. And that's why he was able to make that physical contact. Whereas as Sandy's life gets darker, she's trying to pull away from Sandy and she's not close. So
you feel like she was Sandy. She was her.
Yeah, because they would kind of move and mimic each other a lot too, right? And he would be dancing.
I know,
with
but
her.
I just kind of thought she was like walking in her shoes, like in her mind, sort of, like in a psychic way or a psychic link or something. So I didn't get the physical mark on her skin. And like I said, they didn't really follow up with that in any other way.
Yeah, I just think for like screenplay wise, they're probably just doing that to make it seem like there's a potential threat because like, oh, they can hurt her, right?
Yeah, but it's misleading.
It is. Yeah.
And not necessary. I don't know that I would have cared if the hickey scene was not there. I don't think I would have cared.
Okay.
If she had a hickey on her neck, they could easily have cut that.
Yeah.
Can we talk about things we would cut? Is that jumping to a different thing?
Can I talk about one more thing that I like?
Yeah,
and then we'll talk about things that I would cut. So these 60s sequences are very well done. And it reminded me of The Shining a lot. Because, you know, there's all these sequences where, like, kind of Jack will walk into a room in the Overlook Hotel, and sometimes it'll be empty, and other times there'll be a bunch of people there, and there's a party. You know, it almost was like that was the whole gimmick of the movie, was that, like, you're in the 60s and you're in this ghost world and everything's live and vibrant. And part of that was that Matt Smith, when you first see him in that sequence, he's real charismatic and charming. And I love Matt Smith. He's my favorite Doctor on Doctor Who.
He's sinister in this movie.
Exactly. Yeah. He's very charismatic in that first sequence.
Well, he has to seduce her.
Right.
He has to like get her to trust him, and he does.
Right.
And then he turns out to be awful.
Right. And so that first time is like magical, but then it just like is sinister pretty much by like the third time.
Yeah, the third time she meets with him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So just to kind of give context to this too, basically, we see that Matt Smith is just having Sandy meet with men, and he's like pimping her out basically, I guess, to make money. And there's these montages where, there's this really great sequence I thought where Ellie is trying to escape from the situation. She realizes this has become dark, and she's walking down this hallway behind this club, and she keeps looking at all these rooms, and there's just all these disturbing things kind of going on. I really like that sequence too.
Yeah, that was upsetting. That's more horrific than the actual horror in this movie. It's like what happens to these young girls who go to, in this movie it's London, but I think New York could easily like sub in for London here.
Sure.
These young girls who go to these, big, these places they've always dreamed of, small town girls, and what happens to them when they get there. They don't realize they aren't able to realize their dreams. They're preyed upon and taken advantage of. And that's what happens to Sandy. And it's tragic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think all of that is good. It's that when you get into that third act and, there's a lot of visions of the guys groping for her and stuff. I think it's a different kind of movie than the subject matter they're presenting. So what would you cut?
I'd cut at least, how many scenes are there where the different men, these are the men that Sandy has slept with, that you think have contributed to her demise, but we find out that her demise is more like the death of her dream and who she wanted to be, not to her actual physical being, because she's alive. She's Diana Rigg, but she never amounts to what she thought she was going to.
Yeah.
So there's how many scenes are there where they're bothering her?
Oh, many.
Okay, well, I would have cut at least one or two of those scenes, especially to me the library scene.
Yep,
she goes to a library and wants to do research, and they have a whole extended scene. I guess it's supposed to be scary where the dead men are haunting her, and she almost stabs a classmate. And I just didn't like that scene. I just wish they cut it. There's also a party scene, a Halloween party scene.
Yeah.
It is Halloween, isn't it?
I think so.
They're all in costume.
Yeah.
A party scene where I'm not sure we needed that either.
I guess not. They were trying to show, because one of the things that the movie does really well in the beginning is it establishes how she's a fish out of water. She comes from this small town. She's very sheltered. And then she goes to this art school in London, and everyone's pretty obnoxious. Her roommate is horrible. I kind of wanted something bad to happen to her roommate.
Yeah, and it didn't.
It didn't, yeah. She almost got stabbed in the eye with scissors, but that's about it. And then there's this one guy, this black British Pete Davidson. Right?
Yes,
He looks like Pete Davidson.
See that. I totally see that.
And so he's friendly with her throughout the whole movie, and he's like a love interest by the very end. He's the only nice one to her.
Yeah, he's very kind.
She wants to stay in the 60s bubble, and that's why she keeps going to Sandy's world.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually agree that you could cut that party. Even that party has a really great song. I like that song, and I really like the imagery at the party. But yeah, you could cut that, I think.
I just felt like at least cut one of them. You didn't need both of them. And I also, when I say there's missed opportunities, I'm thinking about this too. If you want to have all these people haunting her, I wanted it to be something in the fashion world, because she does have some sort of freak out when she's designing clothing in the classroom, but it's a short scene and it's real brief. You know what I'm talking about? They're like, Ellie, what's wrong?
Yeah.
But it's not an extended scene like that library scene or the party scene. And I didn't even want it to be in the classroom. I wanted something on the runway to happen or something like that. If we're going to have it in the fashion world, let's have a full fashion horror moment. I feel like that could have been so fun and interesting. Yeah. I'm thinking about Neon Demon a little bit.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Because it's about the fashion world and the horrors of the fashion world, and that's also a very stylish movie. So I don't know. I guess I kind of wish, which is also not a perfect movie, but I kind of wish the two had merged or something.
Yes.
This movie had taken some of that, and that movie had taken some of this. They could be really great if they got together and dated or something.
Right. I'm so glad you brought up Neon Demon. That's great, because I saw that there started to be these negative reviews of this movie before we went to go see it. I got kind of worried. And one quote that someone said was, Neon Demon ran so that Last Night in Soho could stumble. Like, you know how it's usually like this movie walked so this one could run?
But Neon Demon's far from perfect. I mean, I think if I was going to rank these movies, I'd put them like on a similar level. They're different, but they are similar in some ways. I mean,
they are. Yeah, they're very different. Too.
But I think they're both good movies. I would give them both, you know, a full tomato or a thumbs up or whatever you call it. Like I've told you this, I'm irritated with Rotten Tomatoes, and I think they have, you know, anyway, okay. I won't go on my little soapbox.
Okay, you're in soapbox? Okay. Mm-mm. But I think Neon Demon is kind of, you said you want to take parts from both, right? Neon Demon is a bit more sinister. And I think that this, based on the subject matter of like women being taken advantage of and exploited, Neon Demon does a better version of that. And I want something more like that if you're going to tackle this subject. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So,
yeah, go darker. Like, right. How did you feel about Sandy actually being the one to kill the men versus the men bringing Sandy down?
It's good, but it feels kind of hokey. It feels kind of
like it.
Right. It's like, you know, oh, the woman had the power after all. She got them. But I feel like her story has more impact if she is destroyed versus, oh, well, she's the villain.
Yeah, they almost turned her into the villain by the end. Diana Rigg tries to kill the main character and then changes her mind as the house starts to burn down and says, go save yourself.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like you said, it's the third act that stumbles, I guess. But I didn't love that they turned Sandy into this, like, I'm going to get revenge on all these men who, like, slept with me for money. I mean, it was the way they, like, portray it is pretty terrible.
Yeah.
She's kind of almost in like forced prostitution, I think. It's not really anything she wants to do.
Right.
Not all prostitutes, I think, are in forced prostitution. So it could be a liberating thing, a way for someone to make money by their own choice, etc. But I think there are like probably more horror stories associated with prostitution. Anyway, this goes into it, and it is terrible. But for her to be like, yeah, like you said, the villain. Slasher. Yeah, like a full-on serial killer.
Yes.
She turns into like a Charlize Theron and Monster, you know, who's like a prostitute who starts to kill her Johns. I mean, that's what she turns into, and I just didn't love that turn of events.
Right. It's too dark a thing for the way that this movie is presented. Because she's like hiding the men underneath the floorboards and the walls. And she makes some kind of comment in the beginning. Diana Rigg makes a comment in the beginning of the movie of like, you know, when it gets hotter out, it really smells in this room or something like that. And it's like, probably because there's like, she says it's good. Like, do you like garlic?
Well, I wonder if she's the one like,
maybe she's putting the garlic out there.
Yeah, to like cover the smell.
Yeah,
there's some little hints of that are kind of funny if you go back and like think about it.
Yeah. Did you have other points you wanted to make? Because I had a few like little fun little notes I learned too.
No, go for it. I just want to say I loved the music, loved the fashion, loved the look of the movie. There's a lot of things I really appreciated about this. Really liked the female performances and Matt Smith.
Yes.
And just. Okay, yeah. No, there's too many good things to give this a bad review, even though we didn't love that turn of events.
I agree. I like, if we were going like out of a scale of 10, I would give it like an 8 or 8.5. I liked it a lot.
Okay.
You mentioned the music, and one of the things that happened during the movie was Shari and I would hear certain songs and we'd be like, wait, that can't be the original 60s version of this song. That song came out in the 80s, right? And one example was I Got My Mind Set on You, which we know the George Harrison version from the 80s.
Which I thought was like, I thought it was an original 80s song by George Harrison.
Right. I did a little research. It's not. It's actually by James Ray. So that version that we heard in the movie by James Ray is the original.
Came first?
It did. Then we heard There's Always Something There to Remind Me. And we're like, what?
By Naked Eye from the 80s. You're telling me that's a cover?
It is. And it is by Sandy Shawn.
You are breaking my heart. All these songs that... It's because in the 80s they like made him more famous than they had been in the 60s. I guess they weren't quite the hit in the 60s. And wow. Yeah.
So that's one little thing that I learned while doing a little research. Another thing I learned was that the title of the movie was not the original title. Edgar Wright had suggested Red Light Area or The Night Has 1,000 Eyes.
which is the title of a 60s song.
Yeah.
I don't love those titles. I don't think Last Night in Soho is appropriate either, though.
Yeah, I got a little.
Like Soho, like when did we even talk about Soho in this movie?
Isn't that where they are?
Yes, but like, did they ever like really utter the words? I mean, maybe it was said like once or twice, but it was more like London, London, London. Like
right.
I wasn't thinking Soho about this movie.
In the modern day, some of the girls say things about Soho, like that obnoxious Joe Costa, the roommate.
Joe Costa.
Yeah, she says something about that. Right?
Okay, I just don't feel like it was like established that this is Soho that well.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
So I don't love that title.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like they didn't have like a good title, maybe, but
yeah. Well, yeah, it sounds like we both like the movie. I'm glad that we saw it. I would like Edgar Wright to make more movies like this, but maybe just don't take that subject of like a woman being objectified. Like, 'cause that's real serious stuff. You got to get like real dark with it.
Well, show what it is. Let it be that.
Yeah,
That's what I think. Don't try to like, oh, but she got him back. Because the fact is, a lot of times she doesn't get him back.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
They do bring her down, and it's okay to have a ghost story about that. I think.
Yeah. Very well put. So I think that's pretty much our review right there. Right.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't liked, subscribe, please do. Shari and I review movies like this all the time. One movie that we are pretty excited to see is the movie Antlers, which we talked about a long time ago. It's been delayed, but we're hoping we get to the theater to see Antlers for next week. So make sure you guys join us for that review, and we will see you guys